The media, in my opinion, doesn't really understand mental illness.
Joanne Minich's son Peter, diagnosed with schizophrenia, has been locked up here for more than a year, charged with assault but never convicted. She says he's been kept in isolation and restraints for the majority of his time.
A connection between these mass killings and people who are mentally ill.
See, Peter, it wasn't so bad.
Yeah, except for having to sit next to that screaming autistic lady in the waiting room.
We take only the most dangerous and damaged patients, ones no other hospital can manage.
Many of these shootings, we have people who have mental disturbances.
Is there any correlation between autism and any kind of violence?
We already have so much regulation, Matt. You know, there's tremendous regulation right now that people don't even realize. We have this is a mental health problem. These people are all, to put it mildly, they're crazy.
So my name is Paul Eftham. I'm a clinical psychologist in Brookline, Massachusetts, and I've been in practice for about 20 years. Mental illness is an interesting term. It's sort of a catch-all condition. It describes a few different categories. I would say that in general, when we talk about mental illness, we're talking about some kind of a mental health concern that causes trouble with either thinking or your mood, or it might make it problematic in your relationships with people, or it might also make it hard for you to function in doing the things that you want to do.
People don't understand. I have good days, I have bad days. And with the chemical imbalances, with the past trauma that I have, it's going to come out. And it comes out often, and it's how I deal with it, which is the biggest part of mental illness, is how you respond to an episode. And it hurts a lot knowing that people don't connect sometimes to it. People aren't aware of it. People don't understand what it's like to just wake up sad after going to bed sad and then continuing that sadness throughout the day. I think the media has a very poor representation of mental illness.
You know, they're not psychiatrists. They're not clinical psychologists. Most of them, in fact, are narcissistic people who have a very skewed perception and no understanding, no compassion. And so I would say they do not understand mental illness.
One thing I noticed was even in some children's media recently, I've seen some things like I was thinking of Beauty and the Beast. There's a scene in Beauty and the Beast where Belle, her father, is made to look as if he's somehow unstable and crazy, and so they try to lock him up. And it portrays mental illness in that film in a negative way. And these are young children watching it, so it can start even in children's media.
Have you gone completely insane? I mean, sir, have you gone completely insane? Completely insane people go outside, suck on a rock, and bark at the moon.
What the f*** is wrong with you? Sucking on a rock and barking at the moon is not a sign that someone's mentally ill. It's a sign that they are a wolf with an iron deficiency.
And that's the media's portrayal. That's it. I suck on rocks.
His choice of words are just stupid.
It is kind of offensive. I was glad that the other moderator could make fun of it with comedy, which was kind of nice.
Dr. Phil is supposed to be a psychologist, and here he is perpetuating a negative stereotype about mental illness. It's unbelievable.
I think if people want to understand mental illness, they shouldn't be watching Dr. Phil.
A lot of the crime shows on television, CSI, Law and Order, they tend to portray people with mental illness as being violent, as being criminals.
This isn't guns. This is about really mental illness.
We can spend all of our time saying if we take this gun away, the question is, why are these people all pretty much the same? They experience some form of mental illness.
Sometimes I'll get in a fit of rage if I feel offended or something like that, and then the violent thoughts will start circulating in my mind, and then I have to use like all my breathing techniques and my thought techniques, and I've been doing a lot of dialectical behavior therapy that helps me organize those thoughts so I never act on them. I've never acted on a violent thought. All you hear when, I mean, it's a tragedy when gun violence happens, when, you know, these shooters come out, they didn't get the proper help or health care that they needed, but they blame it on the mental health community, saying this person has this wrong with them. And sometimes I feel like they portray the entire mental health network as, you know, deranged or something like that. When those school shootings happen, they put fear in the mass, fear in the public, thinking that every single person that is afflicted with something is going to end up this way, and that is something that I don't stand with.
0% of my patients have been violent with others.
I think a lot of the movies and the reports make it like people with mental illness are violent, and the MacArthur study shows that take out substance abuse, people with mental illness are much more likely to be victims of violent crime than to cause violent crime. And anytime there's something in the media like a mass shooting or something, you know, if the person didn't have mental illness, they'll never run a story that says so-and-so who was never diagnosed with mental illness. And, you know, if they find there's mental illness, then they'll lead with it. And I think you just can't win, and people don't understand.
What we've seen is that gun violence is often blamed on mental illness, when in fact, and we're thinking of some of the mass shooter episodes and things that we've seen that derive an enormous amount of attention. But in general, I'm not aware of any strong links between gun violence and mental illness. In fact, we know that people with mental illness are less likely to be violent than the general population. So that actually suggests that there's less of a link.
I would say that I'm really not a violent person.
People with mental illness are more likely to be the victims of violence than they are the perpetrators of violence.
What about there are people who don't have people's best interest in mind? And why not?
Who are not necessarily
Who are not mentally ill.
Yeah.
They're just boneheads. They're just bad people.
Yeah. You're depressed because you're a miserable fucker and want to choose to be that way. Fucking, I ain't having a great day either, but I ain't taking no fucking medicine for it.
The public perception of mental illness, it tends to have a few effects on patients of mine. The first one is sometimes people don't even want to come in and talk to me because they feel like there's something wrong with them because they have some sort of emotional or mental struggle.
I think we could disclose about it. I have friends that are afraid to disclose that they have mental illness because of their jobs.
Oh, I certainly think that the media has caused a lot of shame, you know, both internally within myself and externally, in the sense that mental illness as a whole is something to be ashamed of.
I think the most positive to come out of it was my bucket list. I have a bucket list of things that I want to do to make my life more meaningful, make my life inspired. And that came about because when I was younger, I was so miserable all the time. I was so sad, so scared of the world. I would literally have a phobia of pretty much everything, a phobia of going outside because I think everyone and everything is going to hurt me. So I started jotting down ideas for things to take me outside of my comfort zone, and now I get out and I go and do things and live my life.
There's been a lot of very successful people with mental illness over the years. I mean, if you take Abraham Lincoln, who's well known to have had major depression, like Ted Turner or Patty Duke, you know, a lot of very famous, successful people have mental illness.
I wish they knew that it was nothing to be afraid of. We're just like everyone else. We just live our lives like everyone else.